The first mistake was assuming the human wouldn't eat them. When the Vorqual matriarch, Sarveth, left her cubs on the jungle edge of the human outpost on Zeta-5, there wasn't a soul on the Galactic Council who didn't recoil in horror. Not because they thought the human would harm them out of cruelty, but because humans were still considered apex anomalies. Unpredictable, adaptable, and worst of all, emotionally confusing. And yet, there stood the human, Lieutenant Mara Halliday, arms crossed, eyes narrowed at the three oversized predator cubs blinking up at her with double-lidded eyes and quivering tails. "You've got to be kidding me," she muttered. "They're bigger than my bunk." The Vorqual cubs, fanged, scaled, with small dorsal ridges still soft with youth, chirped in unison. One promptly tried to chew on her boot. The transmission had been clear. Sarvetha's voice, rough like a landslide through gravel, had come through the outpost's emergency relay. "The cubs will be safer with the human. I return in 5 planetary rotations. Protect them with your life." And just like that, the matriarch disappeared back into the mists, her massive frame vanishing among the ferns and glowing spores of Zeta-5's deadly underbrush. Mara wasn't a xenobiologist. She was a scout pilot, a drop lancer, and an expert in tactical exfil. Not a babysitter for 3 semi-sapient lizard lions who could probably gut her by accident during nap time. "Protocol's got nothing on this," she grumbled, crouching cautiously. "You guys potty trained or just gonna acid spit on my walls?" The middle cub sneezed and ignited a patch of moss. Mara sighed. "Guess that answers that." To be fair, Zeta-5 was the last place she expected to be assigned childcare duties. The planet was uncolonized for a reason: acid rains, shifting tectonic plates, and wildlife that could give nightmares to fully armored Marines. The outpost, barely a 2-room recon shack and a long-range transmitter, had been built solely to monitor Vorqual migration and establish temporary comms for deep space mapping teams. Mara had signed up for solitude. Maybe a few encrypted games, some heavy reading, and workouts on the roof at dawn under triple moons. Instead, she now had 3 apex predators snuggling her foot. And by snuggling, she meant attempting to determine if it was chewable. "This is so far outside my job description," she muttered, nudging them gently off. "Do you eat meat? Inorganic compounds? Great, I've got 2 rations left, and you look like you eat asteroids for snacks." She flipped through the databook, tapping furiously. No protocol. No cross-species caretaking guides. Just one encrypted override message from the Council. "Do not harm the cubs. Failure to comply may be considered an act of war." Perfect. The next 48 hours passed in a slow-motion avalanche of chaos. The cubs were intelligent, curious, and reckless. They played with gravity toggles, shredded one of her uniforms trying to imitate her dressing rituals, and nearly sent a distress beacon to the wrong quadrant after climbing on the comms panel. The largest cub, whom Mara nicknamed Fang, because of course he'd grown his first tusk already, took an immediate liking to her bed, flattening it completely under his 12-stone weight. The smallest, Squeak, had an uncanny habit of vanishing into ventilation ducts and popping out at inopportune moments like a horror hollow, usually while Mara was eating. And the middle one, Spot, thanks to a peculiar bioluminescent patch that flashed every time it lied, was clearly the brains of the operation. It had figured out how to open ration packs within a day and had even started mimicking basic human words by the 3rd. "No!" Spot chirped proudly, launching a datapad across the room. "That's not what that means, Spot!" Mara yelped, diving after it. "And that was the only working map of the Western Ridge!" Every moment was a test in restraint. Or comedy. Possibly both. What unnerved her most wasn't their behavior, it was the silence from Sarveth. No updates. No check-ins. No return. By day 5, Mara started to worry. She wasn't equipped to go looking for the matriarch, not with 3 untrained cubs and a jungle full of nightmares beyond the perimeter shield. The storms had knocked out most satellite relay connections, and the last drone she sent out returned with scorch marks and missing parts. Something was wrong. Spot noticed her anxiety first. It stopped raiding the med kit and instead curled up beside her boot with an odd purring hum. Squeak nestled in her jacket, refusing to come out even when Fang tried to wrestle it free. And Fang himself stood near the door like a silent sentry, his dorsal ridge slightly elevated in alert. Mara didn't sleep that night. By morning, the perimeter alarm screamed. She jumped from the console chair, tripped over a ration bag, and slid across the floor just in time to see the external cams flicker on. Shapes moved in the mist, large, slow-moving, and definitely not the matriarch. Humanoid. Mara blinked. Zoomed in. Mercs, she breathed. No insignia, no council tags. What the hell are they doing here? The outpost wasn't on any major supply line. It held no strategic value. Unless. She spun, checking the cubs. All three stared at her. Squeak hissed. Fang growled. And Spot, chillingly calm, muttered, "No." "Yeah," Mara muttered, grabbing her pulse rifle and locking down the shutters. "No is right." Within minutes, the attackers breached the jungle's outer layer. The sensor screamed again, half her system blinded by jammers. She had 3 cubs. 1 half-charged rifle. And a growing suspicion that someone had followed Sarveth here. Or worse, hunted her. Her hands moved automatically, switching the base into silent lockdown mode, rerouting external feeds to manual. The cubs huddled behind the cryochamber. Spot looked at her with a strange clarity, then padded over and nudged the rifle toward her. "You stay back," she whispered, ruffling his frill. "I'll handle this," he chirped. "Yes." She almost laughed, almost. The first explosion hit the outer paneling like a thunderclap. The wall shook. Cracks spiderwebbed across the plexiglass windows. Mara leveled her rifle and whispered, "Let's see if humanity's as unpredictable as they say." Because if she was going down protecting 3 alien cubs from mercenaries with no names and no right to exist in her sector. She didn't care what the Galactic Council said. This wasn't diplomacy anymore. This was personal. Outside, the trees caught fire. The second explosion didn't hit the wall, it tore through it. Mara flung herself sideways as a chunk of her workstation disintegrated in a cloud of smoke and sparks. A bolt of plasma carved a glowing trench through the console panel where she just stood. "Spot, hide!" she yelled, coughing through the acrid haze. But the cub didn't move. None of them did. Fang had stepped between the blast hole and the others, his ridge flaring in ominous electric blue. He let out a deep, guttural growl that resonated in the air like a subsonic drumbeat. Squeak curled tighter behind a fallen ration crate, eyes blinking rapidly. Mara ducked behind a crate and peeked out through the breach. 4 figures. Armored, matte gray exosuits with no visible insignia, moving in tactical formation. Not pirates, too coordinated. Not council rescue. These were professionals. Corporate, maybe? Or Black Ops. She tapped her comms mic dead. "Of course," she muttered. A second plasma bolt hit the back wall, rupturing one of the coolant lines. Vapor hissed upward, filling the space with a freezing fog. Mara gritted her teeth, holding her rifle low, adjusting for scatter. One wrong move, and this became a tomb. She slid along the floor, using the mist as cover. Fang's eyes tracked her, silent, still protective. She raised one hand, "Stay." The cub stilled. Then came a sound that cut deeper than any blast. A voice. Filtered, synthetic. "Halliday. We're not here for you. Stand down. Give us the cargo." "Cargo." She blinked. Her fingers curled around the rifle stock. They weren't even pretending. Her voice rang sharp, defiant. "They're children." Another pause. "They're Vorqual," the voice responded coldly. "And they're worth more than your entire species." That did it. She opened fire. The plasma round hit one of the mercs square in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. He didn't fall. They'd armored up. She dove behind a second crate, narrowly avoiding return fire. Her wrist pad flared red, rifle heat warning. She only had 9 shots left before cooldown. From behind, a soft series of chirps. Spot. What? She hissed. Spot pawed at the med console. No, not the med console. The vent beneath it. The duct system. Mara blinked. You want to flank them? The cub nodded. Yes. That's a suicide crawl. You don't even know. Spot slipped into the shaft before she finished, vanishing like a ghost. Mara almost called him back. Almost. Instead, she turned and whispered to Squeak. You stay. Don't move, no matter what. Then she moved, low, fast, flanking left toward the ruined comms panel. The external hatch door still had a manual override. If she could force it open, maybe she could force them out. But the mercs were already breaching. One stepped fully into the room, his mask gleaming, pulse blade humming at his side. Mara didn't wait. She popped out and fired. Hit his leg. He staggered. Another merc ducked in behind him. Return fire burst past her shoulder, barely missing. The walls shook again. This time not from weapons. From inside. From the ducts. A screech erupted through the vent system like a banshee on fire. A glowing shape burst from the ceiling duct. Spot. And Spot wasn't alone. The cub had triggered the emergency autoflux wiring in the secondary vents, creating a backdraft loop. As the vent panel fell, hot gas roared outward, engulfing two mercs in a short-range burst of searing heat. One screamed. One collapsed. Mara blinked, stunned. Spot landed beside her, singed but grinning. I don't believe you just did that, she whispered. Spot just chirked, tongue flicking. The third merc retreated, dragging the wounded one. The leader, the one who spoke, stood his ground. This isn't over, Halliday. Mara lowered her rifle. You just tried to kidnap cubs under council protection. You're done. No one's coming for you, the voice replied. You're a glorified babysitter. And you're alone. She smiled coldly. Maybe. But so are you now. Then Fong charged. The largest cub moved like a thunderclap, slamming into the final merc with enough force to dent the exosuit. They crashed into the far wall, breaking part of the med console and leaving a deep crack in the floor. The merc didn't rise. Silence fell. Mara exhaled slowly, knees buckling. She sat down, back to the wall. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from the adrenaline crash. Okay, she muttered. That was officially the worst babysitting shift in history. Spot curled up in her lap, humming. Fawn sniffed the unconscious merc's helmet, then grunted and dragged him toward the door like a disobedient toy. Squeak emerged slowly, blinking, then padded over to lick a cut on Mara's arm. She let them fuss. For the first time, she realized, they weren't just reacting like pets. Or cubs. They were coordinating. Learning. Evolving in real time. And they just defended their caretaker like a pride defending its own. She tapped into the internal logs, rerouting backup power to scan for reinforcements. If those mercs had a ship in orbit. The screen blinked. A new ping. Close. Small craft. No ID tag. Mara's blood ran cold. She opened a visual feed, expecting more mercs. Instead, the screen filled with a massive, scaled face. Glowing eyes. And a voice that cracked through the channel like tectonic plates grinding. I have returned. Sarveth. The Vorqual matriarch. The jungle behind her burned. Her dorsal crest was blackened, her side bleeding. Mara stood up. You're hurt. The cubs? Sarveth demanded. Safe. For now. But you didn't tell me mercs would follow you. I did not know. Her voice dropped an octave. I thought I misled them. I was wrong. A long pause. I am coming to retrieve them. Mara glanced at the cubs, still clustered near her, blinking up with wide, trusting eyes. Something inside her clenched. They're not ready, she said quietly. They've bonded. They're learning. If you take them now, that stops. Sarveth blinked slowly. They are Vorqual. We do not imprint. Then explain why they just risked their lives to protect me. Silence. For 10 long seconds. Then, I will arrive within the hour, Sarveth said. We will speak. The feed cut. Mara sat down hard. Fawn pressed against her shoulder. Spot clambered into her lap again. Great, she muttered. I've got 1 hour to convince a 14-foot predator matriarch that I'm the better nanny. The next 45 minutes passed in cleanup and makeshift tria. She bound her arm, reinforced the wall with wreckage, tethered the mercs with synthetic vine cables. And finally, after forcing herself to eat a protein bar she hated, she sat with the cubs in silence. Then the jungle fell quiet. Even the wind stopped. And from the tree-line emerged the full form of Sarveth. Taller than the outpost doorframe, armored in natural plating scarred with age and battle, she stepped into the clearing with all the presence of a storm cloud choosing where to strike. The cubs didn't run to her. They stood behind Mara. Sarveth stopped. Her eyes narrowed. You have changed them. Mara stood her ground. They changed themselves. I just gave them space to try. The matriarch circled slowly. Spot speaks now, she rumbled. I heard it through your external feed. He plans? Mara added. Fought off mercs. Saved me. Sarveth growled low. Not in anger, but consideration. She extended a clawed hand. Spot didn't move. Fawn took 1 step forward, then stopped. Squeak squeaked. And that was when Mara realized the cubs weren't rejecting her mother. They were asking permission. Sarveth inhaled deeply. Then she knelt, massive, terrifying, regal, and lowered her crest. They are no longer only mine. Mara said nothing. I left them with you because I feared death. The matriarch continued. But I returned to find them not protected, but evolved. She looked up, gaze sharp. The council will not allow this. You understand. I do, Mara said. But they're not just Vorqual anymore. Sarveth slowly nodded. Then we must make them something new. The council summoned her without ceremony. One moment, Mara was patching the outpost's ventilation system with melted med gel and spare uniform scraps. The next, a white-hot pillar of light carved the jungle sky apart, and a high-orbit relay ship blinked into atmosphere, silent, massive, and unmistakable. Vorqual did not kneel to many powers. The Galactic Council was one of the few exceptions. Sarveth met the envoy alone at the edge of the clearing. Mara watched from the roof with the cubs flanking her. All 3 were deathly silent. The Council's chosen emissary was a 4-limbed Zalari diplomat named Orin. Polished chitin armor, robe of translucent nanofabric, expressionless ocular domes. Flanked by 2 heavily armed Centrax guards. No attempt at subtlety. Orin's voice floated upward from the clearing, thin and metallic. Vorqual Matriarch Sarveth. Human Lieutenant Mara Halliday. You have disrupted interspecies protocol by fostering unauthorized hybrid behavior. This deviation must be resolved before contagion spreads. Contagion? Mara echoed under her breath. Spot growled. Sarveth did not lower her head. There has been no contagion. Only learning. Learning outside established parameters is deviation, Orin replied. Deviation leads to conflict. The cubs must be separated. The human reassigned. The incident sealed. Mara climbed down from the roof before she could think better of it. The cubs followed in a tight formation, like they had rehearsed it. No, she said firmly. Orin turned its dome toward her. Your input was not requested. Doesn't matter, Mara said, stepping between the envoy and the cubs. You're about to separate a bonded group. They're not just animals anymore. They've made decisions, acted with logic, emotion, strategy. That's not deviation. That's growth. Sarveth remained silent. Orin's voice sharpened. You overstep your role. These are not your kin. I didn't claim they were, Mara said. They chose me. Spot stepped forward. She, ours. Squeak added a chirp. Safe. Fawn, never the blunt one, simply rumbled and puffed up. The guards flinched. Orin blinked slowly. You've taught them language? They taught themselves, Mara snapped. I just listened. The wind blew through the clearing, hot and electric. Tension clung like static. Sarveth finally moved. Her voice cracked the air like a tectonic shift. The human speaks truth. You allowed this? Orin demanded. I witnessed it, the matriarch said. I watched the cubs take on traits no Vorkwal has exhibited in 100 generations. They planned. They protected. They spoke. They mourned. Orin's eyes glinted with something dangerously close to fear. They imitated. No, Sarveth replied. They adapted. As all apex species must, if they are to survive. The diplomat glanced toward the guards. Then we must contain this before the pattern replicates elsewhere. One guard raised its weapon. Mara raised her rifle. The other guard hesitated. The tension snapped like an overstretched cable. Then, a fourth voice cut in, calm and low. Stand down. All of you. From the treeline emerged an unexpected figure, Ambassador Darrow of the Earth Union's Cross-Species Affairs Division. A small, bespectacled woman, no taller than Squeak, standing up straight. Gray streaks in her hair. A long coat bearing the Earth insignia. Her arrival was neither loud nor theatrical, but it shifted the entire dynamic in an instant. Orin stiffened. This is a closed arbitration. No longer, Darrow said. Earth has filed a sovereign interest claim. Article 17b of the Interdependency Accord, protection of self-aware sapients, regardless of origin. Mara stared. You knew? We suspected, Darrow replied, eyes never leaving the diplomat. But we needed confirmation. These cubs didn't just learn tricks. They're forming conceptual identity. That changes everything. They are Vorkwal, Orin repeated, but quieter this time. And Vorkwal are sentient. Your own archives list them as high-intellect non-sapients under provisional re-evaluation. That means their next cognitive leap puts them into protected status. And you nearly euthanized them for deviation. Darrow turned. Sarveth, can you confirm the cubs acted independently of your direction? I did not teach them, the matriarch said. I merely trusted them. Orin looked rattled now. This is not precedent. No, Darrow said. But it will be. Silence fell again, long and heavy. Then Spot took 3 steps forward and looked up at Orin. No hurt, he said clearly. No take. Orin recoiled slightly. They've already set a precedent, Darrow said, softening. They're speaking in moral terms. That's not mimicry. That's empathy. The guards slowly lowered their weapons. Orin straightened, domes unreadable. Then a vote must be called. Sarveth nodded. Agreed. Agreed, Darrow said. Then, Orin said slowly, the cubs shall remain under observation until the council casts its judgment. And the human? Mara asked. Orin stared at her for a long beat. Remains for now. Mara let out a slow breath. Darrow turned to her, a quiet smile forming. Don't unpack just yet. The next few days became a whirlwind. A temporary satellite relay was deployed. Scientists and linguists were dispatched. Council psychologists tried to run tests, which failed when Spot refused to answer any questions unless they came with treats. Fawn accidentally broke a translator collar by sneezing on it. Squeak drew something that suspiciously resembled Mara's face on the wall with bioluminescent pollen. Reports poured in. The cubs showed signs of emergent reasoning, abstract problem-solving, and, most alarmingly to some, a stubborn preference for Mara over all other handlers. One night, while the jungle howled beyond the shield dome and council ships hovered silently above, Mara sat on the rooftop with Sarveth. Do you regret leaving them with me? She asked. No, Sarveth said. But I did not expect you to change them so deeply. I didn't try to. Mara whispered. It just happened. That, the matriarch replied, is the most human sentence I've ever heard. They sat in silence for a while. Below, Spot snored. But the peace didn't last. On the 6th day, the council called an emergency assembly. Live broadcast. 12 species present. 300 observers. One decision. Orin stood at the center of the amphitheater dais. The matter before us is clear. The Vorqual cubs have shown behaviors exceeding baseline non-sapient thresholds. However, integration into human alliance culture may constitute contamination of natural evolution. We must determine whether this outcome is permitted. Sarveth stepped forward. They chose. And choice itself, Orin snapped, is what we must question. Were they taught to choose or born with the right? Mara stood voice firm. You're asking the wrong question. All eyes turned. They didn't choose because they were told to. They chose because they felt it. They risked their lives. They mourned. They laughed. Spot figured out how to beat your logic maze using empathy, not statistics. Fong held his ground when I was wounded. Squeak still hides in my jacket every time thunder hits. These aren't simulations. They're lives. Darrow rose behind her. Earth supports full sentient recognition. Immediate reclassification. Galactic protocol codification. Orin hesitated. And then nodded. The council will deliberate. They did. For 3 days. When the decision came, it was single-line protocol. Cub-derived behavioral shift confirmed. Human Vorqual interface to be studied. Provisional sentience granted. Guardianship, Halliday. New entry, Galactic Protocol 118 Zeta. When a predator entrusts a human with its young, both become more than what they were. The transmission went out system-wide. Across colonies, research stations, and border worlds, people watched the human and her 3 oversized alien cubs stand under a jungle sky, silent, bonded, undeniable. And for the first time in recorded galactic history, an apex predator raised its offspring not through survival, but through trust. It wasn't until the statues went up that Mara realized nothing would ever be the same. 3 of them, 1 for each cub, stood just outside the new interspecies learning complex on Zeta 5. Spot's statue had its paw raised, as if mid-negotiation. Fong's pose was all muscle and protective posture, towering even in stillness. And Squeak, of course, was immortalized halfway inside a vent panel, with only its glowing eyes peeking out. Mara's own likeness was nowhere to be found, by her request. She'd gotten enough unwanted attention after Protocol 118 Zeta was ratified. It turned her into a symbol, and symbols didn't get days off. Now she was Director Halliday, Earth's representative to the Vorqual Integration Initiative. A human ambassador to a species that, until a month ago, most civilizations had considered one bad mood away from being declared too dangerous for first contact. Yet here they were. Vorqual cubs now studied alongside human children in pilot simulation pods and language modules. Fawn had taken a shine to tactical formation games. Spot taught a daily logic class to Zalari interns. Squeak mostly ate furniture and told stories in glow paint on the walls, but those murals were already drawing academic fascination across 3 systems. As for Sarveth, she had taken on a new title, Warden Mother. A role previously unknown in Vorqual society, denoting a matriarch who shared parental rights with another species. It was a shift that fractured ancient traditions, but one that had taken root so quickly that younger Vorqual had already begun mimicking human hand gestures and using Earth idioms in hunting chants. The old ways weren't gone. But they were no longer alone. Mara stood at the edge of the garden outside the main hall, sipping something halfway between coffee and algae concentrate, watching the cubs chase a poor, panicked diplomatic drone around the landing pad. Darrow walked up beside her, carrying a stack of data pads and a look of barely restrained amusement. "They've been invited to the Galactic Youth Summit," she said without preamble. Mara choked slightly. "The what?" "Official diplomatic presence. First recognized Vorqual minors on a council stage. Spot's already designing his speech." Fawn asked if the summit has snacks fit for war. "I think that means he's excited." Mara groaned. "And Squeak?" tried to eat the invitation. Twice. Of course. Darrow handed her one of the datapads. Also, Earth wants to run a Doka series. No, Mara said flatly. Animated version for kids. Nope. Merchandise. I will break someone's kneecaps. Darrow snorted. You'll need good knees for the summit floor. It's standing room only. Mara rubbed her temples. I was supposed to be on Zeta-5 for 3 months. Alone. You know what my worst-case plan was? Power outage. Maybe a bug in the coffee recycler. You didn't plan for 3 apex predator toddlers? No, strangely that wasn't in the orientation packet. They both laughed. Down by the landing pad, Spot suddenly leapt onto the drone's back and rode it like a hoverboard, chirping proudly. The drone spun in helpless circles. Mara sighed. They're going to embarrass the entire species. Probably, Darrow said. But we'll still be better off for it. That night, the cubs snuck into Mara's quarters. It wasn't unusual anymore. The doors were set to allow them in. What was unusual was that they came in quiet, single file, and carrying something. Mara sat up in bed as Fawn placed a bundle in front of her with utmost care. It was made of scavenged materials, cloth, cords, a piece of her ruined uniform stitched over what looked like a crate lid. On it were claw marks that formed symbols. She blinked. It was a flag. A new one. Human and Vorkal colors merged in a spiraling design, centered by a circle containing 3 paw prints and a human handprint. Spot touched the center of the circle. Pack, he said. Squeak followed. Home. Fong, quieter than usual, leaned his huge head down to her lap and added, Mother. Mara froze. They had never called her that before. She reached out, fingers trembling slightly, and touched the patchwork flag. Her throat tightened. I don't know if I earned that, she whispered. Spot curled beside her. You stayed. No title in the galaxy mattered more than that. 3 months later, Mara stood at the center of the council summit floor, wearing a dark blue ambassador's uniform lined with Vorkal scales, an honor gifted from Sarveth herself. The amphitheater was filled with thousands, diplomats, scientists, skeptics, journalists. Spot took the podium. Fong flanked him like a bodyguard. Squeak sat in Mara's lap with a translator chip in its ear and a snack pouch in its claws. Spot cleared his throat. I am Spot. Vorkal. And now, part of something else. The crowd murmured. We were not supposed to speak. Or think. Or change. But we did. Because someone believed we could. He turned to Mara. She saw us. The lights dimmed. Behind them, a projection formed of Mara's outpost from weeks ago, the wall riddled with holes, cubs crouched behind crates, her rifle raised. The day they defended her. It played without narration. Just one phrase beneath it. She protected us before anyone said we were worth it. The chamber went still. Even Orin, seated high in the oversight gallery, didn't interrupt. Spot spoke again. Now we protect others. Not with claws. But with choice. Applause didn't erupt. It built. Like thunder starting on the horizon and sweeping through 1,000 voices at once. Fawn let out a delighted roar. Squeak dropped its snack and clapped with both paws, licking the crumbs off the translator chip. Mara didn't cry. But her eyes did glisten. In the months that followed, the story spread. Not as myth. Not as propaganda. But as proof. That trust could rewire instincts. That empathy could bloom in predators. That humans didn't tame wild things, they just gave them reasons not to be alone. Vorkal colonies introduced human guardian rights. Earth schools added Spot's speech to civics programs. And Galactic Protocol 118 Zeta became mandatory reading for all new interspecies diplomats. It was, after all, the first time a predator didn't just evolve to survive, but to belong. Years later, when Mara was finally granted leave and offered any post in any system, she returned to Zeta-5. The outpost had been rebuilt, bigger, smarter, full of teachers and students. But she didn't go to the command building. She went into the jungle, past the vines and glowing moss, to a quiet hill where the stars came closest. 3 shapes waited for her. Spot wore glasses now. Taught planetary ethics at 2 academies. Fawn had joined the Sentinel Corps, running rescue ops across war zones. Squeak was writing a book. Or painting one. Or maybe just eating all the reference materials. No one was sure. They didn't say anything when they saw her. Just wrapped her in a massive 3-way hug that knocked her off her feet. And at that moment, beneath the twin moons, Mara Halliday knew something deep and final. She had not raised cubs. She had raised people. The jungle whispered around them. Somewhere, a drone passed overhead, tracking the sky. And from that quiet hill on Zeta 5, a new species of future looked up. Fierce. Kind. And no longer alone.